Welcome to the Boundless Bible. My name is David Shapiro.
Hey, I'm Javi Marquez.
And I'm Jason Holloway.
Hey, everyone. So the other day we were talking about what topics we want to talk about. And one of the things that came up is how we title ourselves versus how God titles us. And it's interesting because right when I was looking at this topic, I heard another pastor having a conversation, and they were talking about people that don't believe in the Lord. And right off the bat, I heard him saying that they were sons and daughters of disobedience. And we hear that all the time that, you know, we're sinners, we're disobedient, this is who we are. And I think what happens is people title that to themselves. They're an alcoholic, they're an adulterer. They lose their identity in Christ and they become who they title themselves as. Or what's scary enough is some of the leaders in the church, who they call them, and they say, you're a disobedient person or you're a sinful person. And although it might be true that we do sin, it's not the title of who we are.
Yeah, as you were talking about it, I know that a lot of times when you talk about this self-identity, it's the negative side, it's the alcoholic, it's the cheater, it's those things. But it's also very prevalent in like business spaces. You know, people are like, oh, I'm this, I'm an artist, or I'm, you know, the best at my job, or I'm the person who's the best kickball player on the field, whatever it is. But like people label themselves and then they have this challenge with, you know, what if you are an artist and you're not producing art at that moment? Does your worth fall apart? And no, it doesn't, because that's not how God sees you. God doesn't see you as your identity as an artist. He sees you as you. And so there's positives, there's negatives. And like, I think this is a really important topic because there's so many things that we label ourselves at that we don't have to.
Yeah. You know, I think it's a great point. I didn't really think about that, but yes, even as a positive one, it can fall apart. Your life can fall apart, your whole world, if you're no longer the best dad.
Yeah. I'm the professional gymnast and I'm the most skilled in the whole state. And then I, hurt my ankle. I'm not, by the way. I hurt my ankle. Does it make my worth go away? Like, no, not at all. Like, not even a little bit. Your worth is always equal. It's always the same to God.
You know, as you say that, it reminds me of like people that had a career in something. They were just this top exec, right, or this top athlete, and now they're not, or they can't. Their ego or their identity is
wrapped up in that thing, right?
And then they start to like deteriorate, or just they don't know what's the next thing for them to do, and they just feel like, I put all my time and energy into this. Who am I now?
Yeah, who am I? Right, and it's not that you shouldn't have things in your life like that. It's just the difference between identifying yourself as who you are through that thing and having that thing as a part of you.
Yeah, I definitely went through that, actually, being a professional athlete and being in the military and always being somebody who played sports. When I tore my bicep and I couldn't do anything, I couldn't lift anything, I did go through a stage where I was not sure who I was, what was going to be the next step. If I couldn't do athletics, what was that going to mean for my life and for me?
Yeah.
Because I pinned my life on my title.
Yeah.
Same. I did acting for a couple of years, and through those years of like acting, taking classes, and, I wasn't a top actor, but, I really surrounded myself in that. And when it stopped, or when I went away from it, luckily going into it, like towards the end of it, I found Christ.
Yeah.
And the transition out of it was not easy, but it was better just because my root, my foundation was in Christ. My identity was in God. And, He loved me for who I am and who I could be, or where I'm going next. So that helped me during that transition to go, all right, well, this is where I'm at right now. Where you want me to go, God? I'm leaning on you. And every little step that I took forward, which was really hard, I was scared, I was in fear. He showed me every little steps, one step at a time, of course. And I was able to just kind of regroup and find a new identity, in a sense, or found myself. I got it. I guess in some sense, I got more in touch with myself and who I am in God.
Yeah. I don't know if this is totally connected, but it reminds me of, we've been talking about identity and we've been using this singular identity, right? Like it's, oh, I'm a this, I'm a that. But I think it's also important that people have a conversation about nobody's this or that. You are always many, many things. I was actually listening to a podcast once with Killer Mike, who I love, by the way.
Yeah.
And Killer Mike was being asked, hey, how have you lasted this long? How have you lasted this long in the record industry? And he goes, when I first came in here, the record industry wants you to be a singular like identity. They want you to be, the this or the that.
Yeah,
and that's how they're able to market. It's right. It's marketable, right?
Yeah.
And it's easy for people to understand because it's one thing. And he goes, and he said one of the most insightful things. He goes, nobody is one thing. He goes, I'm a rapper, but I also like classical music, and I also like to do this, and I go to church and I do this. And he's like, I'm all these things. He goes, I didn't fall for the single person trap. So I didn't burn out that single person wick. I don't know if he said it that way, but but essentially, he's able to like move through these different identities because he is all those identities and he hasn't gotten stuck into one. And now I take that back because I think that's an important thing for all of us to remember too. God always loves you as who you are. God always sees you as the one single identity, the true identity. But even as we think about ourselves, we're not one person. We're not one thing. And we shouldn't be surprised when we act contradictory to who it is that we think we are. It's like, oh, I'm a Christian. I should be acting like this. And I didn't for a minute. I did this thing wrong. I acted the wrong way. And now I'm upset with myself. And it's like, we don't have to be upset with ourselves over those things. Like we should note that we didn't want to do that and try harder not to do it next time. But God doesn't have that feeling. He sees you and he goes, you know what? You made a mistake. Move on. There's no judgment. It's just what it is. So I do think it's important to look at ourselves as non-singular perspectives.
Yeah. I think it's really great when we connect our identity with what God's vision of our identity is.
Yeah, right.
Then amazing things happen. And bring it to the Bible, I think of Thomas. And we look at Thomas, and when you talk about Thomas, everyone, the first thing they say is Doubting Thomas.
Right.
And that's his title. His title is literally Doubting Thomas.
Perfect example, right.
And I go, man, here's this guy who, was doubtful. He needed to touch the holes in Jesus' hand to make sure it was him. But he's also the one that went to the Far East and brought the message to India.
Right.
And this is somebody who did not live by his title. If he listened to other people around him, he would have said, well, I'm Doubting Thomas. I'm not worth anything. I shouldn't be doing anything.
Right.
But he didn't. He listened to what God saw of him. He matched his title, and then amazing things happened.
You say Doubting Thomas, and I think about Moses and his journey of his identity, right? There's so many messages on identity with Moses, I think. And how much of a insecure or just felt like he wasn't right. And that's the thing I love about God. God, we're so finite, right? In our thinking of how we see ourselves and what we think we could do, it's so finite to what God knows that we could do or even achieve and stuff like that. And I think Moses is a good one when we talk about identity because he just felt like he couldn't do half the things that God is calling him to do. He wasn't ready. He's not right. Call somebody else. And not only that, he still has his own flaws and stuff like that. And he was able to still do so many things. And I'm speaking very general here.
And call back to that previous episode about faith, right? Like he didn't believe it necessarily, that he was up to that par. That he was up to those things that he was being asked to do, but he acted in faith and he trusted God. And by doing that, he was able to do things that were beyond him.
Right. And that's one of the reasons why I bring it up, because the encouragement there is, although we don't see it, God does. And he sees the greatness in us and what we could do and achieve. And not about it's not monetary, it's not, and just kind of putting these notches on your belt and stuff like that and achievements, but in the greater good of what he wants you to do, how he wants his children to be, which is us. We could do so much more than what we think we could do.
Right. And tying it back to what you're saying, that's the difference between adopting God's identity of you and you adopting your own identity of yourself. Right. That's the whole wrap up is that it's, if we trust our own instincts about who we identify as, we're limiting ourselves tremendously. If we don't limit ourselves to our identity, but we see ourselves as children of God who are loved no matter what, the possibilities are endless. The other person who comes to mind for me besides Moses is David. Again, we talk about singular, this is who I am, or this is what I am. David was anointed. Oh, David was great. David did a lot of bad stuff. Not you, David.
Yeah. No.
King David, right?
Hero too.
I guess all of them, right? But I guess we're all flawed. But we think of.
Do you have a second? Because David.
Yeah, I can give you some stories.
But we talk about him, and it's always like, oh, David, the great king, the great king, the great king. He did all kinds of bad stuff.
Right.
He did some really harsh things that are rough to even imagine. But even we as people, besides our self-identity, we have to look at other people and remember that other people too have God-given identity, their goodness, their grace.
What I love about that as well is like, you know, whatever you're at in your identity or wherever you're at in your journey, as you achieve and put it on God, right? And just seek God for it, just the redemption part of it. Like every story, right, has this like low end, right? Like,
right.
This is, you know,
The
it's not
hills and
going great,
valleys.
right? The hills and valleys. And then at the end, boom, they're just like a great ending, you know, now they're a hero or whatever it is. And I think that could be us. I really do. I really feel like,
Agreed.
And the great
I've been there. I think we've all been in the valley, right?
And not only that, I think the great thing about that is when we do reach that point is in the process of it, the glory goes to God. And people will see that as you give it to God and go, whoa, that I could not have done that by myself. And that's another thing about identity. We won't be able to do it ourselves. It's always God with us.
Yeah. I mean, I think as a child of God, we have a message, we have a purpose, we have a testimony, every one of us. And every one of us is a child of God. So whether or not you're a believer yet or not, we all have a story.
Yeah, just because you deny your parents doesn't mean they're not your parents.
There you go. But I think what happens is sometimes we focus so much on these words like sin. We're sinful people. And we talk about sin and we go, how do we conquer sin? I go, it was already done. It's not a sin problem that we have because Jesus defeated sin. It's a faith problem.
Right.
And that's a whole separate, episode. But literally what we're looking at is, hey, I have a testimony. God loves me. He sees me differently. I'm not a sinful person as a title. I am a person loved by God who sins. It was defeated by Jesus. So now I have a faith thing I have to work on. I have to become more faithful of Jesus, understand what happens, and understand that I don't have to live in my negative or even positive title that could break me down one day.
Right.
My title is just child of God. That's it.
I'll ask, why? Why did God love you that you fall so short and you hit sin and you always achieve sin or come up short?
As a father, my first instinct is I love my kids. They've come up short more times than I can count. I love them. It's part of what they're going to do. It's part of what I did to my parents and my parents did to their parents.
And their kids will do to them.
Absolutely. So the love is there because, and I don't take away from God's work in the creation of my kids, but when I look at it and go, I created my kids, they're my kids, and I love them. God created us and loves us. And that's pure and simple. That doesn't get any more easy of a concept than he loves us because he created us. He knows we're going to fail. He knows we're going to do wrong, but he doesn't want to live us. He doesn't want us to live in that identity because he did not make an alcoholic. He did not create that. We might have become that. He didn't create an athlete that's going to, see his life and title his life as athlete. And once he can't do that sport anymore, now you're nothing.
That was our choice.
That was our choice.
From our human side that likes to make strange decisions and take self-responsibility as opposed to,
that's profound.
When I follow what Jesus would do, when I follow Jesus, Jesus said, I'm the way, the truth, and the light. So when I follow him and I follow his way and I follow his truth, I'm going to find his light. When I try to follow my way, my truth, I don't find the light.
What helps me with that is not about me. When you talk about identity and talk about ourselves and all that stuff, it's not about me. God loves me. He cares for me. I am important, but it's not about me.
Right.
And I think once we grasp that, as far as living here on earth with other people in relationships, is not about us. And as we continue to give back, be humble, just kind of be graceful to others, we'll be able to find ourselves even more and find the grace of God, find our identity within that, and be more like Jesus in the light.
I think that's I agree. I think that's one of the most profound insights that I have come to reconnect with this year is the importance of other people and the importance of that selflessness. Like, it's not about me. I have to take care of myself for sure. But it's interesting how I'm able to take care of myself better when I'm hanging out with you guys, or when I'm at the church and I'm giving back to the church, or when I'm at work, and I'm, giving my time and my patience to people and my consideration, even though I have 25 things to do, but I give my time to them, it gives back. And it's just such a profound truth that it's not about you. And when it's all about you, there's a limit. There's just there's just a human limit that you're going to hit. Now you open it up to people and it's another thing. You open it up to God, a whole different universe.
Yeah. I think what becomes challenging is not everybody has faith, or even when they have faith, they get lost sometimes in going, hey, I feel good and I feel like I'm titled this way and I'm living for God. And then what happens is a Christian completely destroys them, calls them, titles them, says, hey, you're not welcome here anymore because you're an adulterer and we don't accept that here. And they title them an adulterer. And so people start to go, well, I don't want to follow this because, and I go, absolutely, don't follow Christians, follow Christ.
Right.
And so as somebody who's following Christ, I go, we make mistakes. We sometimes label people incorrectly. There are times when, I'm driving and somebody is going really slow or swerving in front of me and I'm getting annoyed with them. Meanwhile, I don't know, maybe they have an emergency going on in the car.
Right.
Maybe they're not feeling well. Right. Something's going on. That's not my first thought. But I'd love it for it to be.
Yeah, but perfect. Look,
and you call them something else, right? You give them a different identity.
Yeah, you child of God. When you that's a perfect example of the difference between your neurology and your psychology when you're thinking of other people and you're thinking of yourself. If you're in that moment and somebody cuts you off, your first instinct, if you're thinking of yourself, is about me. If you think about them, you might go, but maybe they have an emergency, or maybe they're late for work, or maybe something's going on, or maybe they didn't sleep and now whatever. But that's the change. And it's, even if it's minor, it's humongous. And it adds up to these gigantic changes in your life and how you see things differently. Going back for 1 second, it might be changing the topic and I hope not, but you said this whole thing about Christians versus Christ. And that has been something that's been in my mind so heavily lately. Like, Christians are human, and you have to keep that memory alive in your brain, because so many non-believers get turned off by Christians who are not acting like Christ, or even believers get turned off by Christians who are not believing like Christ. And it's so intensely important to remember Christ is the only perfect example. Christ is the way, the truth, the light. Christians are following the way, the truth, and the light, and they are off that path constantly. Right. And it's so important to remember that you can't let them turn you off of Christ, because they are not Christ.
I think one of the things I also hear quite often is that, Christians use the Bible to prove their point, to give a narrative that's political, versus what the Bible is truly saying. They'll pull something out of context. They'll pull a verse out. They'll use it and say, well, this is backing up my opinion about a certain subject. And then somebody looking in goes, well, I don't want to follow that. That's not who I want to be, because if that's what your book says. But the problem is that when you make errors with translation, and kind of what we do here is we have three different people with three different perspectives, but we're in context. We read in context of the word. We read what comes before, what comes after.
And if we don't, somebody corrects us.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to remember that, unfortunately, there are a large percentage of Christians who have not read the Bible.
I couldn't agree more.
And they still use it. So what I would say is for somebody who is, faced with, I don't want to follow that because of what somebody said, don't listen to the somebody.
Right.
Read it for yourself. Learn about Christ. If you're titling yourself, bring it back to that, to what we were talking about. If you're titling yourself and you're struggling with mental health and going, I'm struggling right now and I am this, even if you say that I'm somebody with anxiety, don't label yourself like that.
Right.
You are loved. You have people around you who want to love you. And I don't want you to label yourself that way. I want you to label yourself.
And so many labels cause shame.
Yes.
And people don't realize the impact of shame on their life. Mm-hmm. And when you're able to release yourself from that shame, or being able to have your shame released by re-identifying with yourself with God's identity of you, it's life-changing.
So coming full circle from, the person that I heard, or, that I overheard saying that we are sons and daughters of disobedience. You are not a son of daughter of disobedience. You are a son of daughter of the Most High. And you can live in that and know that my title is son or daughter of the Creator. And that's a beautiful thing.
You want to drop that mic now? All right. Well, guys, thank you for tuning in. Thanks for listening. We always appreciate every listen, every website visit, every question, every comment. So make sure you check out the website, www.theboundlessbible.com. Send us some comments, questions, considerations, feedback, you name it, and we're going to get to it. So until next time.
See you next time, guys. Later.